And those were the minutes from January 28th, 29th, and 30th. Hopefully you've had a chance to review those. Does anybody have any corrections? Senator Warren, or questions or anything? Senator Warren?
Just a motion.
Oh, yes, yes. Are we ready for that? Okay, very good. I take a motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move we approve the minutes for the dates as presented to us by the chair.
Is there a second? Senator Fagg seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion passed. Thank you. Those minutes are always a treat, right? Very good. Nice job, Jackie. Okay, so the first thing we want to do today is have a hearing on Senate Bill 139, but we're also going to try and work Senate Bill 121, which we heard yesterday. It just depends on some technicalities, and we'll be able to determine that after the hearing. We're waiting on the amendment, and our revisor is on WebEx today. So if not, we'll work that bill at a later time. So at this point, I'm going to open the hearing on Senate Bill 139. And we have Brock. Would you like to come up? Or well, actually, I think the first thing I want to do is have Eileen explain the bill. I'm so sorry about that. I'm used to seeing her right there. Eileen, are you with us?
I am here, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Would you like
Good morning,
to?
Madam Chair. Good morning, committee. Senate Bill 139 makes updates to the state banking code, amending KSA 9-519, 9-1111, 9-1114, 9-1724, 9-1807, 9-2011, 9-2107, 9-2108, and 9-2111. Section 1 of the bill amends KSA 9-519, which is the definition section for bank holding companies. The amendment appears in subsection B1 cap C and stipulates that a hearing to determine whether a company is a bank holding company shall be conducted in accordance with the Kansas Administrative Procedure Act. Section 2 amends KSA 9-1111 by fixing an internal reference on page 3 in line 30. Section 3 amends KSA 9-1114 pertaining to rules and requirements of the Board of Directors of a bank or trust company and places timeframes for notification of certain changes in the board. The amendment would require that a bank or trust company file an oath with the commissioner within 15 days of the election of any officer or director. Additionally, a bank or trust company would be required to notify the commissioner of any newly appointed chief executive officer, president, or director prior to the commencement of that individual's duties. Lastly, a bank or trust company would be required to notify the commissioner of any chief executive officer, president, or director who leaves their position voluntarily or involuntarily is relieved from their position within 5 business days. Section 4 amends KSA 9-1714 relating to mergers that result in a national bank, and the amendment to this section would make void the charter of the bank or trust company that ceases to exist after the merger. Section 5 amends KSA 9-1807 pertaining to administrative hearings held to determine whether a cease and desist order should be issued by the State Banking Board. The amendment to this section stipulates that such a hearing would be held in accordance with the Kansas Administrative Procedure Act. Section 6 amends KSA 9-2011 regarding unlawfully engaging in the banking or trust company business. The amendment would carve out an exception from the statute and allow federally insured banks with charters from other states or from the federal government to operate in Kansas without the commissioner's approval. Section 7 amends KSA 9-2107 relating to the contracting for trust services. And the amendment to this section would remove certain requirements of the application made to the commissioner for the contracting of trust services. The amendment would no longer require certified copies of the written action taken by the Board of Directors of the originating trustee to be provided, and would remove the requirement of proof of publication of notice that the applicant intends to file such an application. However, these requirements would be reinstated if the originating trustee or financial institution is transferring more than 50% of the financial institution's total fiduciary accounts. Section 8 amends KSA 9-2108 pertaining to the relocation of a trust office. The amendment to this section would extend the exemption from the application process for a trust company relocating to an office from less than 1 mile to less than 10 miles. If an exemption is granted by the commissioner, then each trust company shall document the written action taken by the board of directors of the trust company approving the proposed relocation and provide all other regulatory approvals. Lastly, Section 9 amends KSA 9-2111 pertaining to the prohibition on out-of-state entities to establish or operate a trust facility in Kansas. Currently, an out-of-state entity may not establish operations in Kansas unless its state authorizes a Kansas chartered trust company in that state. And the amendment would give the commissioner the ability to apply the greater of the requirements stated under the banking code or the laws of the non-resident trust company's home state required for a trust company to do business in the non-resident trust company's home state. And with that, Madam Chair, I can stand for questions.
Thank you, Eileen. Committee questions for the reviser? I don't see any, Eileen, so we'll just begin with the hearing. Thank you. Brock, go ahead and come on up and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Brock Rayler. I'm General Counsel for Office of the State Bank Commissioner. We thank the committee for holding this hearing and accommodating our schedule and rescheduling simply because we had 2 banking bills that were supposed to be heard at the same time. So greatly appreciate that. We also really appreciate the work of the revisor's office. We unfortunately got this bill a little later than I would have liked, and the revisor's office did a very good job with this bill. Today, we have before you Senate Bill 139, and I want to do things a little differently on this one because the more important statutes are actually at the end. So I would like to start on page 10 with section 7 to cover the most important statutes. And then, of course, I will go back to the other ones in order, just so you can help follow along. Section 7 would amend KSA 9-2111, and we're requesting this amendment to allow an originating trustee to transfer fiduciary assets to a contracting trustee without written authorization from the originating trustee's board of directors or proof of publication in a newspaper. The reason we're asking for this is we did amend this statute last year, but we discovered that some larger banks, especially publicly traded banks, are really not willing to do either of those 2 options, and it's become a pain point. We are aware of one top 10 by bank fiduciary assets bank that is willing to transfer assets to a Kansas trust company if we make this amendment. So we're very much in favor of that. On page 14, section 8, we're requesting a distance where the commissioner is permitted to waive requirements for a trust service office under 9-2108. And one thing to keep in mind is trust service offices in other states are typically rented and it's not owned by the trust company. So they're at the mercy of the landlord in some instances. So it just makes sense to increase the distance and not restrict it to just 1 mile. So we're requesting a little bit more forgiveness here, and if it makes sense, we would allow certain requirements of application be waived up to 10 miles. On page 16, on section 4, we believe this statute is a matter of fairness. Trust companies operate in multiple states and have for a very, very long time. What we're noticing is we are not as strict on out-of-state trust companies that want to do business in Kansas as those states are to our own same Kansas trust companies. So what we would like to do is we already verify with the other states what they require for our Kansas trust company to do business in that state. And what we want to do is just match what our trust companies have to do to operate in that state. So if they charge a $7,000 application fee, we would do the same. If they require surety bond, we would do the same. And therefore, everyone's on a level playing field where the other state trust company has to do the same requirements as our trust company. On page 17, section 10, this covers repealed statutes. I did want to mention that we're requesting repeal of KSA 9-2101. That's a type of trust company we haven't seen in years. We've deemed that statute as obsolete, and it's well past the time that we need to repeal that statute. We're also requesting repeal of KSA 16-842, which is a law that limits credit card fraud on credit card holders. This is actually inconsistent with federal law. Specifically, that under federal law, credit card issues are permitted to negotiate with business customers to limit fraud protection. I do want to make it 100% clear to this committee, federal law does limit the liability for consumers up to $50 for credit card fraud. That will still be in the place. So there's really no consumer harm for repealing this statute. The rest of the changes are mostly cleanup. I'll try to go over them in order. As mentioned, Section 1, it just states the hearing needs to be held in accordance with Kansas Administrative Procedures Act. On page 3, Section 2, it changes a statutory citation that has been overlooked. It's just pointing to a different statute. On page 7, Section 3, which discusses oaths and changes to the Chief Executive Officer, President, or Director. As stated, the banks are required to provide that to us, but there was no timeline associated with that. So we wanted to go ahead and get that updated. And on page 8, Section 4, that states when a bank is merged out of existence due to a merger, the charter would be deemed void the next business day. The reason for asking for this is we've discovered that FDIC has to revoke depository insurance within 5 business days. And under the current banking code, they have up to 15 days to surrender their charter. So really, we're just requesting it to be a little bit sooner to avoid having FDIC go through an order to revoke depository insurance when the bank's merged out of existence anyways. So it just makes sense. And Section 5 also makes a hearing subject to the Kansas Administrative Procedures Act. And finally, on Section 6, we talk about a bank or trust company being authorized to do business in Kansas. This is already federal law under the Regal-Neal Act. And so we do, from time to time, get calls on this from out-of-state banks and credit unions asking if they need our commissioner's approval, and federal law says that they don't. So what we're just trying to do is avoid the question altogether, and we're mirroring the federal law. And the federally insured part, the reason we put that in there is we are starting to see some bank charters without FDIC insurance, specifically with Connecticut, Wyoming, Puerto Rico, and there's a tribe in South Carolina, Catawba tribe, that has one that does not have FDIC insurance at this point. So we feel that's important. With that, that concludes my testimony, Madam Chair. I'll be more than happy to answer questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Thank you, Brock. Committee, that was a lot of very useful information. Any questions for Brock? Senator Warren.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Mr. Royler. Appreciate your testimony. So we heard a bill in a different committee today about walking into an office to conduct your business rather than online transactions. And I know in the banking world, we have an opportunity for both. We have online banking, which a lot of people use, and we have those who prefer to walk in and conduct their business that way. One of the things you said struck me was about the bill was at the mercy of the landlord for some of these trust offices. So I'm hearing from some folks that likewise, they're kind of at the mercy of banking hours. So some banks are open, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and then they aren't open at all on Saturday. So for those who like to conduct their banking in person and they work 9 to 5, there's no opportunity for them to visit their bank and do business in person. So as well, you're general counsel of the Office of State Bank Commissioner, so you're not setting policy, but is there any discussion in the banking world about, if you're going to be open 8 hours, 9 to 5, maybe shifting the 8 hours to accommodate customers' work schedules. Maybe on one day, make it 7 to 3, and then another day, 11 to 7. Is there any discussion about that, while also trying to balance the banks or businesses? They need to operate at a time that's efficient and effective for them, for their employees as well. So is there any discussion at the State Banking Commissioner's office about that, or just to make it accessible for customers?
Madam Chair, and Senator Warren, thank you for that question. And that certainly is a concern, to make sure that the banks are there for the customers. Ultimately, as a regulator, we set the minimum requirements, and it's a business decision. We do like when our banks are open a little bit longer, so they can have that face-to-face interaction, because you're right, that when it comes to banking, it's a relationship. But from our perspective, it is kind of a business decision that the bank needs to choose if that's profitable or not for them to be open for extended hours.
Right, and that's kind of the balance, right? And it wouldn't be extended hours, it's still 8 hours. It's just shifting that window of 8, so that if you have to be at work at 9 o'clock, you can still do your banking at 8 a.m. or 7 a.m. And if you work till 5, then you can do it afterwards, so.
No, I 100% understand your concern.
Yeah, and just, yeah, a balance, and as a business decision, I would trust that the banks are looking at that. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Committee? Senator Rose, do you have a question? Senator Fagg?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Brock, for your presentation. It seems like a lot of amendments, and I'm just sitting here thinking, I'm kind of surprised these haven't been updated before now, and unless that's just kind of a tag on to that 7 through 9. So my question to you is, was this requested by the larger banks, or did you come up with this on the Section 7 part? Just wondering what initiated these amendments.
Yes, actually, that was requested by a trust company in Kansas on Section 7.
Committee, any other questions for Brock? Senator Gossage, did you? Oh, I'm sorry. I saw you raise your hand. Sorry. Okay, very good. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Our next proponent is Kelly Van Zwal from the Kansas Bankers Association. You might be able to respond to Senator Warren's thoughts on banking hours.
I'd be happy to. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Kelly Van Zwal, Vice President of Government Relations with Kansas Bankers Association. Here today to testify in support of Senate Bill 139. We are appreciative of the OSBC's work to constantly keep our statutes updated and streamlined. And bills like this are important because we do have a lot of regulations we fall under, so it is important we're looking at them and seeing what we still need and what needs to be updated with the times. My testimony talks about an amendment we were going to bring, but after further discussions with interested parties, we've decided we're not prepared to bring that amendment. So you can ignore that part of my testimony, and I can just say we're supportive of the changes they're making here. And then to Senator Warren's question, I'm not aware of discussions that we've had amongst our members on that specific issue. I do know that in general, the trend we're seeing is away from people coming into the bank. The younger generations in particular prefer to do their transactions online, online or on their app. But I do also want to point out that, like the OSBC mentioned, banking really is a relationship business, and I know a lot of our bankers are willing to meet after hours, early hours, if you just reach out to them and say, I'm not going to be able to get in to sign those loan documents. Can we come in early? I've done that personally with my banker. So I know they want to make it work for their customers while still maintaining a solid business structure. And a lot of our banks, I know, are open at least one day on the weekend, maybe at least half a day, or they're really trying to kind of adjust to that as well. But I appreciate the question and happy to stand for any other questions.
Committee, do we have any questions for Kelly? Senator Haley.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate it, and thank you for this. And I'm pretty new to this committee and to this concept, and I so appreciate the discussion that Senator Warren has brought, because I am in a district where there are banking hour deserts, if you will, for those who most need it, an older population, not as tech savvy. And there are probably several members who will remain nameless but who do not open on the weekend and who do not have evening hours even, and the working folk or the seniors who have mobility issues cannot. So I don't know where the appropriate time is, Madam Chair, being new to this, but I appreciate the line of discussion in this particular measure that it might be addressed. And if there is some way to address that, because there's a large population that frankly is at a disadvantage for being able to bank. And if you are the appropriate person or the party to whom we should try to get some relief.
Well, I don't believe the current bill speaks to that issue, but we would be happy to be part of any conversations moving forward on that.
Okay, do a brief follow-up. So why was the decision in the bill from 1 mile to 10? I mean, that was in the previous testimony. I didn't know if you were going to address that.
I think,
Was that an arbitrary number? We heard on a previous measure, again, the banking deserts or the areas from the bank. So why is it 1 to 10, especially in some of the more rural areas? Why that?
I think that the OSBC might be better to speak to
We'll
that
ask
question in
Brock to
particular.
come back up.
Okay.
Would you want to come back up and address that? No, good question. You want to introduce
Chair,
yourself again?
Senator Haley, that particular amendment was requested by a trust company as well. And as I said, the trust service offices sometimes are rented, and 1 mile becomes very cumbersome to find another location that is ready to rent and in a decent area. So we increased it to 10 miles because that certainly would be within driving distance. I did look, and I think we've only had one trust office that was moved in the last 3 years that would fall under this new guidelines. I will say that when a bank moves a branch, that's that's still 1 mile. This is only for trust service offices.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And thank you for clarifying that it's, the 1 mile still applies to branches,
Yeah,
which probably get the majority of the activity. Yes, thank you. Committee, any other questions for either Brock or Kelly on Senate Bill 139? Okay, so we have no opponents. We have no neutrals. So I'm going to close the hearing on Senate Bill 139, and thank you for that. So originally, and I see Eric just walked in, we were going to work Senate Bill 121 that we heard yesterday, but we're not quite ready with the amendment. Remember, we had a lot of discussion on that amendment from KU Health Systems. So we will work that bill 121 and with the amendment on Monday. So let me just visit a minute about what the rest of this week looks like. So tomorrow we will have a hearing on Senate Bill 42, but we're going to do it via WebEx. So you need to look for the invitation that you will get from Jackie, and we will have that hearing on WebEx. So we had no meeting necessarily on Thursday other than to work bills, but you can't work bills on WebEx. So we will not meet again until Monday, and on Monday my plan is to work Senate Bill 121, which was the Insurance Commissioner's bill with the amendment. We'll work what we heard today, Senate Bill 139, and then we will also work Senate Bill 42, which we'll have the hearing on via WebEx tomorrow. So we'll work 3 bills on Monday, and then that will be the end of our work. You've all have done a great job. We've gotten a lot accomplished. If there are any issues, please let me know, but be prepared tomorrow, please, for that hearing on Senate Bill 42 via WebEx, all right? No meeting Thursday, no meeting Friday, and we'll meet again on Monday and work 3 bills. Everybody good to go? Very good. Thank you. Any questions? Thank you so much, committee. Meeting adjourned.